Kingdom Hearts is a franchise we love talking about on this channel. It's one of probably the ones I've made the most videos on. I even brought some over from my other channel when I started this one. And my friend Alex from Podcast Now, that's his channel on YouTube as well, he is here with me to talk about Kingdom Hearts today. And we are going to be talking about something that I think we're both passionate about to different extents, and that is the complexity of the narrative when it comes to time travel. Now, I know that we'll get these comments already. There's going to be people saying, oh, well, you just didn't get it, or, oh, you know, it's not that complicated. The point isn't, we're just dumb. The point isn't if we got it or not, or if it's, you know, and things like that. The point is that I think that this adds layers of complexity to the lore and to the world that you don't want to keep revisiting. This is something that I think you can't really do again. And it's something that the series has been pushing for a little bit. So, Alex, I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. I do have a question of the day for everybody out there, which is there something in Kingdom Hearts that you want to see return, or you think shouldn't, whether it's a world, a mechanic, whatever. But Alex, what do you think about this? Because I really think since Dream Drop Distance, it's something that is being used as a crutch. It's even less being used as an explanation, because we can tell, at least through the narrative, there weren't very good signs for KH1, 2, you know, things like Birth by Sleep. Like, there weren't good nuggets of story in there building to time travel. It really does feel like a bombshell that's dropped in Dream Drop, I think, and then parts of the series from there have just been built on it.
Get rid of it all, man. Just get rid. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm with you. I'm with you, and I'm with the fandom. Okay, I can hear myself even typing those kind of comments. Look, I love the complexity of it. I think you do too. And I've long said, you know, when it comes to the Alan Wakes of the world and Kingdom Hearts and all this stuff, I like the fact, to a degree, I like the fact that it is convoluted. I guess I like the fact that you have to kind of look into it. Some games are very surface level. You play the game, you get it, and that's fine too. But I like games that you have to do a little bit of research. With that being said, with a game like Kingdom Hearts, it can get kind of terrible, and it can get very, very confusing. I think really, and you had mentioned this to me right before we recorded, and I'll expand, I think it actually kind of fractured the fan base, because really what it's done is it's made, I think, a fan base that is either so into it and so knowledgeable, which is a good thing, but it's also created a fandom of just like the normies, and I'm not going after either one. But you think about Kingdom Hearts 3, and you think about, in my opinion, I did not think that did enough for the story, and you know, and I actually didn't think it was convoluted enough at parts. And what you had with Kingdom Hearts 3 is I think you had so many kind of just average people say, oh, I love this Disney world and that Disney world. And then you kind of had the diehards saying, well, where was this character that? Because you were building towards 5,000 different things for 20 years. And I think that hurt. I think that actually hurt the experience. And I almost feel like that's like the missing sauce people don't talk about enough, is because the fan base is basically two different people, right? One that plays it for the Disney stuff, and the ones that actually care, you know, about what's going on and, you know, the actual lore. So, and I mean, time travel, I think, is what did it. I think, you know, you mentioned Dream Drop. I would mention the mobile games, right? Like when you have duplicates of characters, and I mean, there's lore. They're not literally duplicates, right? Like there's lore behind it. But when you have all of that stuff happening, and you have like time travel pods, and you have, you know, characters being able to carry each other in their hearts and things like that, when you have that going on, you make it infinitely harder to understand. And I guess, I mean, long story short, I don't know if it really hurts it, because there's parts of that I really love, and again, I think it makes it deep. But to your point, we're at like the furthest you can go. You cannot push this any further, because it's already too far. I generally believe it's too far. If you keep going, it just becomes, you know, like unbelievable. So that would kind of be my stance, I think, on just the whole issue.
Yeah, and I also think, you know, there's parts of convoluted I think we're fine with. Like, I was actually fine with fictional worlds. I mean, obviously the whole thing is fictional, but the idea of, oh, well, you have Virum Rex, and there can be a world within that. Or the idea of, well, this book, I mean, they'd been doing that forever. People got upset about that, but Winnie the Pooh was an example of that, right? It was a fictional world before they even had a word for it. It was a book with characters in it that were alive. They had hearts. And a question that kind of came up is, how can this character have a heart? Like, how can these people, how can you have a book and it's written, and to us it's this static thing, but if you go inside of it, it is a world, and there are people living lives in that world unaware of the fact that they're just a book, you know? I think that elements of that we like. I like elements like you bring up the unversed. I like elements like the nobodies, or the Heartless or whatever other thing they introduce next. I even like Quadratum. I'm excited for it because it really seems to me, obviously we're recording this before KH4 comes out, so if you watch it after that, which will probably be by the year 2045 at this point when it's released, and we're old men in the home at that point, I think that Quadratum's cool. And to me, it kind of seems like Nomura is using that as a way to bring back some of his Final Fantasy Versus 13 ideas and things like that. And Yazura being very clearly built on some of those ideas and concepts. Now, that said, despite liking the complexity, I think one of our biggest problems for both of us is looking at the narrative. It's becoming a crutch. This is the furthest you can go because you've now pushed it to the point where Sora is using the power of waking against everyone's wishes, essentially, to bring them back by going back 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, and essentially changing the tide of these battles. Now, I liked that idea. I remember when, this is not throwing you under the bus, Alex, but I remember when that expansion came out for Kingdom Hearts 3, I remember you were not a very big fan of the story. Is that correct? Or which part of it was it that you were not a fan of?
I wasn't a fan of Remind doing 70% of just replaying 3 and then 30% doing new stuff.
Right. So, and that right there, I think is fair. And I think that I liked the idea of, what if this went differently? Okay, well now Terra shows up. Now we have the lingering will armor. I thought that was cool, but you're absolutely right. And this is a problem you get to with time travel. Are you hitting the point where you're going to make players replay through the same events again and again? Oh, they'd never do that. Well, they did do that. They did do that for an entire expansion. That's something that was Remind. And you might say, well, they wouldn't do that. That's what Melody of Memory was in a way. I mean, different gameplay style, but it was just replay through the events of the series. And so I think when you're getting into time, we now have these issues, whereas time travel, I think when it was brought up in something like Timeless River, where the idea was essentially jumping into a world that was a possible window to the past, that's totally different to me. That's self-contained. That's something where it's interesting. Like if you bring in Star Wars and maybe you want to start with Luke, but maybe somebody later on visits Anakin, that to me is like, if you're doing time, I think you can self-contain it within a world, where maybe you jump into a world at a different time. But if you're doing time for the entire series, and now you have 12 Xehanorts running around, they're different pieces of him, they're in different eras. If they die in this era, they just go back to their era, they don't really die. The lore on that it's not like overly confusing, but it's just, you're very clearly using time travel as a crutch and a way out of complicated things. And this series has done that before. Like, for example, we used to think when you killed a nobody that they died. Well, it turns out if the nobody and Heartless die, they just reunite. That's fine. But I think that when you keep adding these layers to try and explain and move the story in a different direction that it wasn't already set up for, I think that it starts to be something that people just see as a jumbled mess. They don't actually see it as complex. And it starts causing this issue where people don't take your story as seriously because you're so able to write yourself out of any situation. And that's, I think, the big problem with time travel in this game. Even in sci-fi, you have to be very careful with this concept that it doesn't rob you of all stakes. We now have a power that if someone dies, you can just use that power to go back 20 minutes and undo it. And I'm assuming other Keyblade wielders have this power as well, since it was a big deal. So I think you have to be really careful with a lot of elements of this. And I guess I kind of wanted your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, you mentioned Xehanort, and I'll say, just to that angle, I actually really love, so I guess I'm a hypocrite is what I'm admitting to. That part's fine. That part, because, you have the linking of Master of Masters and all that stuff, so I think they've actually done some pretty clever stuff, and when you really get into the depths of at least the main installments, like when you go into the mobile stuff, it does get more confusing, but just the main installments of what Xehanort's plan is, and using time, and really not even just using time, but them just jumping back and forth and saying, okay, this was young Xehanort's idea or his plan, and this is where things splintered off and stuff. That stuff actually is not too bad, and so I guess I'll leave that stuff alone, if I was in charge. But yeah, so I just kind of want to throw in the Xehanort angle to it. But generally needs to be stopped, because I guess to one of your last points, I mean, what's tough is because you have such a diehard group, right? And Nomura can't do it forever, and he also literally forgets. Like as we know from interviews from him, right? He has to look at theory videos to remind himself of what happened. He has like people that have like dictionaries, thesauruses of everything that he's ever said that follow him around. So, and also, when you have new people writing it, like new people are going to be writing missing link, right? And he said that was on purpose because it's literally a missing era, so they can kind of fill in their own, things. That's where it gets like, okay, well now you could run into lore problems or this or that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just think I like it for what it is, like it's fine, but I think using it as a crutch is my biggest problem, because if you keep using it, I think it becomes that more and more, and I think it becomes something where you can escape the stakes that you've built more and more, where someone dies, maybe you have one Keyblade wielder fall on the sword or maybe the Keyblade to bring them back, things like that. You got to be careful, and you also have to ask yourself questions like, why did no one do this before? You had the Keyblade Wars. All these people are dead. They're dead. They're dead. There is an afterlife. We know death exists in that universe. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't want to be too critical on it. I guess my point isn't to this point it ruined the franchise or anything like that. I think my point is more it's kind of out of left field where it comes from in Dream Drop, and then it becomes the cornerstone of Xehanort's plan and the future of the franchise. And if you're going to go any levels beyond Quadratum to other realities, essentially, I think you need to find other ways to get there. I think that if this becomes a sci-fi time travel series, we've now hit the point where we've almost lost the original plot. As much as I love the complexity too of a lot of these things, and Metal Gear Solid is one of my favorite franchises ever. So if I was to harp on complexity just for its own sake, that would be very hypocritical of me. How many snakes are there? How many different angles are there? How many people you think died, but they're an AI and all this stuff? It's like, I'm okay with stuff like that. But I think you have to be very careful that you don't use it as the cornerstone, because to this day, there are people that go back to Kingdom Hearts 1 and even 2, and even with some of the complexities of them, praise the simplicity of them as well. And I think that if you want to satisfy both. You want a deep world, deep story, deep ideas, a science behind it, a world that flows. But you don't want a world where you can write yourself out of any corner you've gotten into because you were writing haphazardly. And I think that if time travel is a crutch, it allows you to write haphazardly and get out of it, which I think for me, in closing, is why I'm so adamantly against pushing it too far.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think you can push it a little bit, and they have pushed it, but like you said, I mean, there's something special to us to Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2, and there is something special, honestly, to Kingdom Hearts 3. I think to a lot. It's actually ironic that Kingdom Hearts 3 is so simple in a lot of ways, and while that made me mad, it didn't really affect other people, and it's probably because they just they tried to stay consistent, right? Like they know a lot of the majority of people are not going to play these spin-offs. I mean, the most majority would play maybe Birth by Sleep, right? But nobody's really playing, and I say nobody, kind of loosely, Dream Drop Distance and 358, right? Like, there's not as many people that are playing those games. When you play 1, 2, 3, you got to kind of keep that story a little bit, and that's a special feeling in 1 and 2. I think, and maybe this is another kind of element. I know we're wrapping up, but this is another element to it. That's what was lost in 3 because there was more introduced, if that makes sense, right? Like you go back to 1 and 2, and that's just what it was, right? It had that simplicity, but it also had a little complexity that you're like, oh, I don't really fully get it. Maybe I have to look this stuff up. They've made it so much more complex that when they actually tried to simplify it a little, they did simplify it a little. For 3, it actually, to me, it backfired on them. Like it made me think lesser, because it's like, well, you've been building the complexity through these means, which time travel is one of them, and there's others, but that's one of them, and so that upset me, right? And I think that upset a good amount of the die-hard fan base of Kingdom Hearts. So maybe that's just another element. When you think about 1 and 2, 3 isn't all that different, but it's a different era, and you know what I mean? Like it was built in a different era, and there's new things now that weren't around, and new things meaning complexity. There's more complexity around it than 1 and 2, and that to me is why 3 struggles in my head.
No, that's actually a very good point, kind of in closing. I think that it's like you built up complexity, especially with things like Ventus, the Unversed, you know, you have things going on like Vanitas, you have things going on with
Theon, which doesn't make sense.
yeah, people residing in other people's hearts, now using replicas, and how replicas can hold a heart and recreate that person. I mean, like, you're using the lore, but then you're trying to use it to find simple answers. Even the ending of Xehanort, for Master Xehanort, I still think it's good. I want to be clear on that. But after everything, it just kind of becomes a very simple ending for the character. You know, it's not a convoluted ending for the character. It's not super deep. It's just kind of like Ericus is back and says, hey, probably shouldn't have murdered people, but I forgive you, we're still buddies. And that's kind of it. And you're kind of like, wait, that's it?
Let's go play chess.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right about that. It's something I didn't even think of going into this. It's like you have all these complicated things, and I've said as a crutch quite a few times, but you even have some of them that you're using that way. But then when you get to the final answers, those end up being blaringly simple at the same time. So you're trying to mix both of those things together, which again is why I think you can't push time travel too far, because say that you push it further in 4, and then you have the same thing where the very end of 4 is just simple, people are going to be like, why did we make this complicated to get to that answer?
A Master of Masters is just Sora from a different timeline or something, and it's like, I kind of half expect that, but see, that feels pretty simple to me, you know?
No, I completely agree. So anyway, let us know what you think in the comments down below. We're always interested to read those, interested to hear your thoughts on the series. Appreciate you watching this. Thank you, Alex, for being here. Check out Alex's channel, but Alex, you have a lot of channels, actually, several now, which will be in the description down below. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here and talk some Kingdom Hearts with me.
Too many channels, man, but I greatly appreciate it. No, thank you so much. Always fun to talk Kingdom Hearts, and this was an absolute blast. Please, Nomura, listen. if you're listening, please listen.
Yeah, and hey, you know what? We love you. We love your stories, but let's tone it down on a couple things. But thank you all for watching. Appreciate you. Have a fantastic day. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe. All kinds of ways to support the channel. I've probably flashed a few during the video, and there will be more in the description. Have a great one, and stay shui.